Welcome and Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Okay. Amen.
All right. So we are doing something. We are doing now Torah T'mimah. It's in the same book that we use, as you can see, for studying the Rashi. Here's the Rashis. But when we started studying Torah T'mimah, I didn't do it the way I'm doing Rashi. With the Rashis, we're doing each week's Sedra, each week's Torah portion, and following that order. But with Torah T'mimah, which we do when we complete all the Rashis for a particular Torah portion, we started with Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 1, and at this point we have been reading solidly through, and we are now getting, as you can see, getting close to the end of Parshat Lech. But we're working our way through with these Torah T'mimahs, and you can also find them on my website, and hopefully you'll enjoy them as well. It's somewhat of a different approach, and again, this is work by Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein, and for this particular section, and if we don't do it today, we'll be doing it, God willing, through the week. I had to do quite a bit of research, and so I have a few different texts that are actually here today with us today. But let's take a look at this. So the verse that we're doing is a verse where God says to Abraham, let's go back here. Yeah, I think we're actually on, let me make sure I'm on the right verse of Hamon Goyim. Okay, so that's the end of this particular verse here. Oops, let's see here. Yeah, these are some notes I made here. Okay, and inserted them. Here we go. This is the verse that we're looking at. Yeah, Ki av hamon goyim netaticha, I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. And we've discussed a whole bunch of different interpretations of this. This is where God changes Abram's name to Avraham. That's the point about playing around with the name Abram and Avraham. Avraham is the Av Hamon Goyim. That's the play on words there, that Abraham is the father of a multitude of nations. And again, we have been dissecting what exactly does that mean, and you'll need to look at some of our earlier lessons for you to see that. So let's take a look. So we're finishing up on that verse here. Av Hamon Goyim. So these are some halachic rulings that come from this particular statement. Because if he is a father of a multitude of nations, that means not just the Jewish people, right? So, Hanodir mi Yisrael, if someone makes an oath not to derive any benefit from a Jewish person, asur gam begebrim, he is also forbidden in that oath, even though he explicitly said he was not going to derive any benefit from a Jewish person, he is also forbidden to benefit from a convert, from someone who converts to Judaism. And that is the Hamon Goyim. That is one of the understandings. And that's why we refer to a convert as a Ben Avraham, a son of Abraham. Because he said he's a father, and people who follow Abraham and Abraham's belief, it is as if Abraham is, in fact, their father. Going on to say, dichtiv, because it states, Ki av hamon goyim netaticha, for I've made you the father of a multitude of nations. And this now is the footnote, which we're going to examine now. This is where we left off the last time. He says, take a look at what's discussed in this previous comment here, all right here, So, and that's the addition that actually is dealing with a situation where a convert brings bikurim, brings first fruits to the temple, and there's a statement that you make when you bring those first fruits, Arami Oved Avi, that my father was a wandering Aramean, etc. But if he's a convert, how was his father a wandering Aramean? Okay, so the point about it is that, again, this is based on the fact that if he is now, in fact, a son of Abraham, a descendant of Abraham, he can make that sense. Here you are in the temple bringing an offering, and you want to make sure that what you're saying is as truthful as possible. So he obviously has a lot to say about that there, but he's going on to this different point here. But he's saying there's a connection. The Iyen Turei Zahav, that's the Taz, Yorei Dea, this is in the Shulchan Aruch, okay, this is a reference to the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Reish Yud Zayin, it's chapter 217 in Yorei Dea, Seif Katan Lamed Hey, footnote, you might say, 35, okay? Katav, he wrote the Taz, the Turei Zahav wrote, Katav, Shelo nimtza makor ladin zeh. He says there is no source for this particular law. Uvechudushay Hagaon, this is Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and in these are the novella. A chidush means new laws that are coming from older laws, right? Of the Gaon, he was a brilliant, brilliant person, of Kiva Eiger. Katav, he wrote, Dechein mashma berosh. You look at all these different authorities that we're referring to. This is also implied in the Rosh. This is Rabbeinu Asher, major commentator on the Talmud. His commentary is basically found at the back of the Vilna edition of the Talmud, B'Nidarim, to tractate Nidarim. V'davar pelahu, and this is now Torah T'mimah speaking. He says this is amazing. In other words, that they make that statement, that there's no source for this law regarding vows of abstinence. And, that if you take a vow of abstinence from an Israelite, that you say you won't benefit from an Israelite, automatically you're not allowed to take any benefit from a convert. He says, to say that there's no source for this is an amazing statement. Shemafurash din zeh b'tosefta, because this law is found in the Tosefta. Just to show you here, let me find it. He is saying, here you see he says where he found this particular statement, in the Tosefta of Nedarim, right? The Tosefta is a parallel work to the Mishnah. It's set out in the same way that the Mishnah is set out. And Perik Bet stands for Perik Bet, chapter 2. Okay? The Iyen Tosafot, and he says, go on, he says, and if you look at the Tosafot, we know these are Rashi's grandchildren. They they feature on pages of the Talmud, excuse me, on pretty much every page of the Talmud. And while the Rashi of the Talmud is there to explain the argumentation and the flow of the argument of the Talmud, Tosafot come in to add other ideas, and they actually do have many applications of halacha, of how what's stated in the Talmud may apply to various situations that are occurring in their time and place. So the reference is a Tosafot, Baba Batra, tractate Baba Batra, Pei Aleph. So I think this is, I'm pretty sure, right. Pei Aleph would be, it could refer to 80a, page 80a. The ger that a convert yachol levarech birkat hamazon, he is able to make the blessing of birkat hamazon, because again the birkat hamazon talks about our ancestors, and they would not be his ancestors, but he has permission to say the birkat hamazon, ulehit palel velomar Elohei avotenu, and he can pray and say, God of our fathers. And again, this is, if he is a convert, it's not God of his fathers, but again, on the basis of this, mitam drasha zo, on account of this particular midrash, this particular interpretation. Ki av hamon goyim netaticha, for I have made you the father, right? Notice we're taking those words very literally, right? Of a multitude of nations I have made you. Shehu av lachol ha'olam. In other words, he is the father of chol ha'olam, means everyone, everyone. Interesting statement, because I think the context that we're saying is that he is the father of anyone who follows his values, etc. Right? So he says kol ha'olam, which means everyone, but I wonder if what this is Torah T'mimah now, Baruch Halevi Epstein, is meaning here anyone in the world who chooses to have the values and the beliefs of Abraham and to believe in one divine creator. V'iyen od, he says, and look further, Mashe Katuv B'inyan Zer, regarding what's written regarding this particular topic, Parshat Bo, in the Parsha, right, in the Torah portion of Bo, it's in the book of Exodus, but Pasuk, where it says in that verse, V'amartem, and say, Zevach Pesach, this is the offering, the Pesach offering, in other words, the Pesach meaning the lamb, right? Uba Parshat, and there's a statement that when you have the Seder in Parshat Bo, you talk about this is the Pesach offering and why, etc. Uba Parshat Bahalotcha, and again in the Torah portion Bahalotcha, which is in the book of Numbers, the pasuk regarding a verse that says, "Vayome Moshe lachovav ben Reuel." Moses said to Chovav, son of Reuel, etc. This is, of course, a reference to Jethro as well. He has these other names as well. And again, another reference. He's got all these different references. Uveresh Parshat Tavo, and this is in the book of Deuteronomy at the beginning of the Torah portion of Kitavo, Be'inyan Bikurim, regarding the subject of Bikurim, and I already mentioned to you how that is relevant there. V'kan ein makom gorem laharich, and here he says it really there's no necessity to go any further into this matter. So one of the things I tried to find was to show you Turei Zahav in Yorei Dea, and let me see what I can do there. Let me see what I can do there, if I can find it. Here we are. So this is where you should see it. And this is, okay, so here you see, this is the Yorei Dea. This is from the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, and you see here Turei Zahav. So you can see that the Turei Zahav is a major commentary on Yorei Dea, and you can see it's chapter 217. This was the reference Hilchot Nedarim, the laws of vows, right? And it says, right? Let's see. We had many of these things, right? Let me keep going. Right. Okay. So this is the law that the Turei Zahav is commenting on, and this is down here. This is Seif Katan. In other words, note 35. Uvagerim, and with regard to converts, lo nimtza lazeh makor. That's exactly what the Torah Temimah is saying. So the implication, of course, and the reason I'm doing this is I want you to have some sense of the level of knowledge of these people, that just, that there is such a devotion to the study of Torah, that they're aware and they're familiar with these various things, okay? He goes on to say, V'nirei de Yalif, and it would appear, he says there's no source for this, but it would appear that he learns it out, Yalifla midematzinu, I think this is le'inyan bracha, that we find it regarding the laws of brachot, right, with the blessings. She'ager yachol lomar Elokei Avoteinu. Remember, we had that a convert is allowed to say Elohei Avoteinu, Shene'emar, and now look at this. He goes on to say Shene'emar ki av hamon goyim netaticha. Right? Again, we've been dealing with this all through this morning, okay, this lesson. Kamo shekatvu ha-tosafot, as the Tosafot, right? Beperek, the Hasfina. This is in Baba Batra, I believe it's Hasfina. Daf Pei Aleph, page 81. Okay. So this is interesting that here we have this reference from that Torah T'mimah is telling us, and I wanted you to see the reference itself, that he is aware of these particular things. And this may be a good time, a good place for us to stop for today. I'm just going to move the arrow here, and next, when we meet again at our next lesson, we're going to look at this particular verse. We'll take a look at it up here, right up here as well. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm happy to take any thoughts or questions or comments that you might have.
Just that an outline of the timeline, or it's not time necessarily, but going from source A to B to C to D
right.
in an outline fashion would make
Yes.
more sense. Now, when you talk about Tosefta and Tosafot,
Right.
and you mentioned Tosefta
Right.
are collateral Mishnayos.
I mentioned, yes, I mentioned that the
Okay,
Tosefta essentially is around the same time as the Mishnah.
right.
And the
Now, yeah,
Tosefta,
let
it's
me
written
let me
very similar.
barge in for a second. There are
Sorry.
numerous baraitas. Are they
Yes.
found in Tosefta, or those are still another source that are contemporaneous?
So the word baraita means outside. That's what the
Right.
word means in Aramaic. And by outside, it means not in the Mishnah.
Right.
It refers just for clarification, it refers to sources that are contemporaneous with the Mishnah, but are not in the Mishnah itself.
Right.
Now, so the Tosefta contains many baraitot, many of
Okay.
these It's basically, unless it's saying a statement that can be found in the Mishnah, the Tosefta is basically contains baraitot. There are other baraitot that
Right.
are found independently in the Talmud. To the best of my knowledge, these are the major sources of what are called baraitot. In other words, you do find at times baraitot mentioned in the Talmud that are not found in the Tosefta. But the Tosefta is essentially, as I said, what would be called technically, it's a technical term, baraitot. So it begs a question, what's the point? The point is this, that the Mishnah has tremendous authority. If you find it, in other words, the issue of law is the authority of the law. To what degree do you need to comply with a law as it's stated? And this is
Right.
the ultimate question, right? To what degree do you comply? So when it comes to Mishnah, it's the highest authority there. That doesn't mean that circumstances may require an adjustment of what's said in the Mishnah, but essentially it's authoritative. The Tosefta is also authoritative, and that's why it's quoted very often in the Talmud, in the discussions in the Talmud, which are trying to understand, and clarify laws stated in the Mishnah. The laws as stated in the Mishnah are very much abbreviated. They're simply given the rationale, the circumstances, etc., not mentioned. And the Talmud sometimes will find one Mishnah and find another Mishnah which appears to contradict the one Mishnah.
Right.
And so the Talmud so these are discussions in the academies in the Talmud where they're discussing why, if they're both statements in the Mishnah, then how come? How can they both live? And so very often, as I said, circumstances. And so it'll show that this particular law applies to one circumstance, and this other expression of the law, which might contradict in some way, applies to a different circumstance. They'll clarify that. So, that's part of what's going on. Again, though, the level of authority that the Tosefta has, which is a very high level, is not the same. It's a matter of comparing it to the Mishnah. All right?
Okay.
Then you have, and basically these are statements made by the rabbis who are mentioned in the Mishnah and the Tosefta. After the compilation of the Mishnah in the year 200, the rabbis, the authorities, okay, so sorry, let me back up. The authorities that are mentioned, the rabbis mentioned in the Mishnah, are known as Tanaim. Tanaim.
Yeah, yes.
The rabbis that are in the Talmud that followed this period are known as Amoraim.
Yeah.
And so there are these various stages of the development of Jewish law, okay, which also carries with it, these titles carry with it the level of authority of these particular rabbis. And the reason why the earlier rabbis generally have greater authority is that they're closer to Sinai. Historically, they're closer to Sinai.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
oh,
that's
yeah,
fine. I just
all right,
wondered where
yes,
Tosefta and Baraita's
right. No, good question.
went together. And
Hopefully,
to further confuse it, you've got Tosafot, which is Rashi's grandchildren.
correct.
So it sounds the
Different,
same to
right.
us illiterates,
Yes,
and
I know.
that's a
My,
thousand years later, or 800
meiosis
years
and
later.
mitosis. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Fine.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes. The Rashi's, the Tosafot and Rashi are all called Rishonim. Okay. They have
Yes.
a title as well, a general title. And they basically, we have from the close of the Talmud for a number of hundred years, there are the Gaonim. It's the period of the Gaonim. These are people
Yes.
who had absolute mastery of this material. And following the Gaonim, we have a period known as Rishonim. And these are rabbis prior to the compilation of the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
All since that time, since the Shulchan Aruch was published, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel like it's like around the 16th century, I believe.
1500s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that would be
That's
16th
16th,
century.
16th century.
Okay. All the rabbis since that time are known as Acharonim, the last. And so rabbis who have authority today are also known as Acharonim. Okay.
Okay.
So there's these
Thank you.
various distinct periods in the development of Jewish law, of halacha.
So basically, the Torah Temimah is projecting back to all of these different
Yes,
sources
absolutely.
and drawing out concordances and contradictions and
Yes,
shows the
yes.
development. Yeah,
And he, of course, is an Acharon.
right.
He's relatively late. I think
Yeah.
he is like probably, I'm going to even guess late 19th, early
I
20th
think it was
century.
1905, 1906.
So 20th century.
Yeah,
Yeah.
early 20th.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right. Okay. Let
thank
me
you.
stop the recording.